All right, welcome back to Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something really interesting, especially if you're into infrastructure and manufacturing, which I know you are.
Oh, absolutely.
We're diving deep into Jindal Saw Ltd's Q3 FY25 financials.
Okay.
You mentioned prepping for a big meeting where this company is going to be a hot topic.
Yeah.
So consider this your secret weapon.
Okay.
We've got company reports, investor presentations, even a transcript from their earnings call.
Nice.
And I gotta say, going through all this, I found some pretty interesting stuff. We're talking a massive project in Saudi Arabia, a legal battle with a big Indian energy giant.
Oh.
And wait, is that the Kumbh Mela?
Oh, wow.
Thankfully, we've got our expert here to help us break it all down.
Well, I'm happy to help.
Their financial know-how and industry knowledge are going to be invaluable.
Well, from the get-go, what really jumps out about Jindal Saw is they're not just playing in India. They've got a global footprint, operations in India, UAE, and even the U.S.
Wow.
And when it comes to iron and steel pipes, they're the undisputed leader.
Okay, so we're talking a major player here. But my first question is, just how financially strong are they? I saw their net worth is close to 10,000 crores,
Yeah.
and their annual EBITDA is around 3,000 crores. But what does all that actually tell us?
Those numbers definitely point to a really healthy financial situation. And what's even more impressive is their EBITDA margin, consistently in the high teens for the past few quarters.
Oh, wow.
Now, this quarter's revenue was around 4,521 crores, which might seem kind of flat at first glance,
Yeah.
but I think that's a little misleading.
Okay, now you've got me curious. What's the story there with the flat revenue?
Well, right now the company's operating around 70–75% capacity utilization,
Okay.
and they just commissioned a new coke oven battery, basically a much more efficient way to produce the coke they need for their steelmaking.
Ah, so they're investing in efficiency even when they're not at full capacity yet. Seems pretty smart.
Exactly.
Is that why we're not seeing huge jumps in revenue?
Yeah, that efficiency push, plus they've been shifting to products with higher margins, like seamless pipes, specialized connections, even stainless steel. That's why their profitability has actually gone AP.
That makes sense. So they're in it for the long game. Profitability over just chasing big revenue numbers.
Yeah.
What's your take on how their margins will do going forward?
I think they'll stay strong, probably between 17.5% and 20%,
Wow.
which is really good compared to others in the industry. But here's where things get even more interesting. Remember that capacity utilization figure?
Yeah.
Well, they're about to ramp up their production capacity even more.
Oh, tell me more. What are they planning?
Their seamless pipe unit, they're doubling the capacity in the next 3 to 5 months. And there's talk of even more new projects coming up in India and the MENA region.
Okay, you can't just drop a bombshell like that and not give us more. What kind of projects are we talking about?
Well, the details are still kind of under wraps. But from what I gathered from the earnings call and some industry reports, it looks like they're eyeing oil and gas and water infrastructure in MENA.
Now that you mention it, I did see something about a NEOM project. Any idea what that's about?
Ah, yes. NEOM. It's Saudi Arabia's project to build a futuristic megacity completely from scratch.
Wow.
It's supposed to have all the cutting-edge technology, sustainable practices. The scale of it is just mind-boggling. And Jindal Saw is right in the thick of it.
So Jindal Saw is involved in this massive project. That's got to be a huge vote of confidence in what they can do.
It really is.
But with big projects, often you have big risks, right? What about their debt? That's always a concern for investors.
Good point. But from what I see, they're managing their debt very well.
Okay.
Their debt-to-equity ratio is really healthy. And they've actually used their export revenue, which is about 25% to 28% of their total, as a hedge against those fluctuating raw material prices.
So they're less affected by the ups and downs of the exchange rates? That's pretty clever.
It is, and especially helpful in today's global economy.
Yeah.
They're even expecting to cut down their debt even more before the fiscal year ends.
Wow.
Yeah, so they are being very proactive about it.
Okay, so we have a company with strong financials, they're making strategic investments, and they know how to manage risk. But now I'm dying to know the specifics of what they do. Let's start with their order book. What's that looking like?
Right now, it's sitting at a healthy 1.48 billion USD,
Okay.
mostly for iron and steel pipes. But here's the interesting part. 22% of that is from export orders,
Oh, wow.
which is a big jump from last quarter. And they expect that to keep growing, too.
Okay, that's a pretty solid order book. But how are their different markets performing? I'm especially curious about India, their home turf.
The Indian market is still strong, especially for water infrastructure.
Yeah.
But there's a shift happening. We're seeing things move away from big central government projects to more state-led ones.
Oh, that's interesting. Could that hurt Jindal Saw?
It's something to watch for sure. But there's a potential upside, too. The Indian budget announcement is this Friday. And a lot of people think they're going to announce more spending on infrastructure. If that happens,
Yeah.
Jindal Saw is in a great position to get a lot of those contracts.
Okay, so we'll have to see what happens with that budget announcement. But before we get too focused on India, you mentioned earlier about a legal battle with an Indian energy giant, NTPC.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's an ongoing case, a contract dispute. But here's the thing. Jindal Saw actually won the first round, the arbitration, and it was for a lot of money.
Wow, a win for Jindal Saw. So what's the issue then?
Well, NTPC is fighting it.
Ah,
So the final decision is still up in the air.
okay. So it's a bit of a cliffhanger. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But now let's switch gears to something more positive. That joint venture you mentioned, Jindal Hunting Energy Services. What's so special about it?
This is all about premium pipe connections, which might sound kind of technical, but basically these are special connections that are super important for really tough environments. Think like deep water drilling or pipelines with high pressure.
Okay.
It's a niche market, but it's a really profitable one.
So Jindal Saw is going after a specialized market with lots of potential. What's their plan there?
They're using the combined expertise of both Jindal Saw and hunting.
Okay.
Both companies have their own strengths and qualifications already in place, which gives them a real advantage, especially when they go after international market.
So it's like a powerhouse team. They're not just aiming for success in India, they're thinking globally.
Exactly. And that global ambition, it's something you see again and again with Jindal Saw.
Well, we've covered a lot already. Their financials, strategic moves, even some potential risks. But before we go deeper,
Yeah.
I'm curious, what stood out to you from all this? To be honest, I'm really impressed by how they're not just sticking to basic pipes.
Yeah.
They're moving into the higher margin products, expanding globally, forming those partnerships. Feels like they're setting themselves up for success way down the line.
It's not just about riding the wave. They're creating their own wave.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, remember that shift we talked about in the Indian market from those central government projects to the state-led ones?
Yes, definitely. I was wondering if that would end up hurting Jindal Saw.
Well, it's something to keep in mind, but while I was going through the earnings call transcript, I noticed they specifically mentioned this thing called the Jal Jeevan Mission.
Okay.
It's a government program to bring clean drinking water to every rural household in India.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a huge project. How does that connect to Jindal Saw?
Well, it's perfect for them. Jindal Saw is already a top supplier for all those water infrastructure projects.
Right.
So even though there's less spending from the central government on infrastructure, there's still a massive opportunity at the state level. And with their track record and all their expertise, they're in a prime spot to win those contracts.
So it's not just about the size of the market, it's about understanding those little details and finding where the growth is, kind of like how they handle those Forex fluctuations.
Absolutely. Using their export revenue to balance out those rising material costs.
Yeah.
They're essentially protecting themselves from those wild swings in currency, especially now with how unpredictable things are globally. It's a really smart move.
It's like they're playing 3D chess while everyone else is stuck with checkers.
I like that analogy. They're always thinking several steps ahead,
Yeah.
making moves that'll pay off in the long run. Now, about their presence in the UAE.
Yes, I saw a little blurb about their subsidiary there, Jindal Saw Gulf LLC.
Right.
Apparently they're selling a lot of ductile iron pipes there.
That's interesting. Ductile iron pipes are known for being really strong and durable, perfect for water infrastructure projects.
Makes sense.
And guess what? The UAE is known for their huge infrastructure plans. They're always building and developing.
So it seems like they're strategically targeting a market with huge growth potential. It's not just about offering the same thing everywhere. They're adapting to what each region needs.
You got it. It's all about understanding the little differences in each market and changing your approach. That's how you succeed globally. You have to adapt.
Okay, so far we've talked a lot about the good stuff, the strong financials, smart expansion, how they manage risk. But let's face it, we can't ignore that legal battle with NTPC.
True, legal battles are never fun. But it's important to look at it objectively. Remember, Jindal Saw actually won the first round, the arbitration.
Right.
Just because NTPC is challenging it doesn't mean there's something wrong with Jindal Saw's case.
So are you saying it could be a strategy by NTPC to delay payment or get some kind of advantage?
Exactly. Big companies, they often use these legal things as part of their strategy. Investors should definitely keep an eye on it, but it's not necessarily a reason to panic. The important thing is Jindal Saw's overall performance doesn't seem to be affected by this legal thing at all. Their revenue is still strong, they're expanding, and they're going after new opportunities.
Okay, that's good to hear. Sounds like they're handling it well. Now let's get back to that joint venture, Jindal Hunting Energy Services.
Yes, this is where they're really tapping into that growing demands for those premium pipe connections.
Right.
They're crucial for making sure oil and gas pipelines are safe and don't leak or anything.
With all this focus on energy these days and the demand for oil and gas going up,
Absolutely.
it seems like they're stepping into a market that's ripe for opportunity.
For sure, they're right at the crossroads of some major trends happening globally. Energy demand, infrastructure development, new technologies. By combining the best of both companies, they're a force to be reckoned with in that specialized market.
Now, as I was going through everything, something caught my eye. It's not something we've really talked about yet,
Okay.
but it seems pretty important. It's their pellet production.
Pellets. That's so special about them, just so everyone knows. Pellets are basically concentrated iron ore. It's a key ingredient for making steel.
Exactly. And get this, Jindal Saw produced over 418,000 metric tons of pellets just this quarter. That's a lot.
It is a lot. It tells me they're not just a pipe manufacturer. They're a big part of that whole steel supply chain,
It's like a secret weapon, and since the global demand for steel is only going up,
right?
this could be a huge thing for them.
It's all about vertical integration. They're not relying on someone else for their raw materials.
Right.
They're controlling a key part of the process, which makes them more flexible and probably saves them money.
It's such a smart move that I bet most investors don't even know about. It adds a whole other layer to this company.
Yeah,
But let's be real, no investment is perfect. What are some things investors should be cautious about?
you're right. Every investment has risks. First off, we can't ignore that the steel industry is cyclical. It's affected by economic downturns, changes in demand, and how much those raw materials cost.
So even though Jindal Saw is doing great now, if there's a global slowdown, that could hit them hard.
It's a possibility, yes. But they are trying to diversify, and they're focusing on those higher value products. That does help reduce some of that risk.
That makes sense. What other risks should we think about?
Well, that legal fight with NTPC, even though it seems okay for now, it's still uncertain. It could get worse and affect how much money they make later on.
Right.
And we can't forget about geopolitics, especially with them operating in places like the Middle East. Unexpected things can happen, mess up supply chains, create a whole bunch of problems.
Those are definitely things investors need to consider. Anything else?
Competition is always a factor. New companies might pop up, existing ones could get more aggressive, or some new technology could shake things up.
So even though they're a leader, Jindal Saw can't just sit back and relax. They have to keep innovating.
Exactly. If they get complacent, that could be their downfall, especially in this industry. It never stops changing.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, from the good to the bad. What's your overall take on Jindal Saw? What's the key message for investors?
Jindal Saw, at its core, is a strong company. They have a proven track record, a clear vision, and they're committed to growth. They're in a good position to take advantage of that global infrastructure boom and the growing need for steel. But, like any investment, there are risks involved.
So it all comes down to investors weighing those potential rewards against the risks and deciding if Jindal Saw fits their goals and how much risk they're comfortable with.
Exactly. Informed decisions are key.
Now, before we move on, there's one last thing I want to share.
Okay.
It really hit me while I was going through these reports. It's not something we talked about directly, but it says a lot about how they operate.
I'm listening. What is it?
Jindal Saw has an amazing track record of getting things done.
Really?
They delivered that first phase of the NEOM project right on time. They're expanding that seamless pipe unit as planned, and they always keep their promises to clients all over the world.
You know, that's a great point. In an industry where delays and going over budget are almost expected,
Yeah.
the fact that they can get things done efficiently and on schedule, that really sets them apart.
It's like they're the opposite of what you'd expect from an infrastructure company. They actually do what they say they will.
Right?
That's a big deal, especially for investors.
Absolutely. It shows how efficient they are and how much they care about keeping their customers happy.
Well said. It's incredible what you can find out just by digging into these materials. It really makes you think, I feel like we just scratched the surface, but I've already got a ton of stuff to talk about at that meeting. What about you? What really jumped out at you from all this info? What impressed you the most about Jindal Saw?
For me, it's got to be how they adapt. I mean, think about it. They're in this crazy global market. Everything's changing all the time.
Right.
But they're doing great. Their financials are solid. They're making smart moves. And they're clearly not afraid to jump on opportunities wherever they are. The Neon project, the move into those fancy pipe connections.
Yeah.
Even the thing about the pellets, it all shows a company that's not afraid to, evolve.
It's true. They're not just following trends, they're making their own path. And speaking of evolving, it looks like they're paying attention to all this talk about sustainability in the industry.
Oh, yeah, you saw that too. In their presentations, I noticed a few times they mentioned looking into those green steel technologies
Exactly.
and reducing their carbon footprint.
It's like they're ahead of the game, positioning themselves as a leader in sustainable manufacturing.
Yeah, sustainability isn't just a bonus anymore. It's a necessity.
Right.
Jindal Saw is smart to make it a core part of their strategy.
It's clear this is a company that's on the move. I have a feeling we'll be talking about Jindal Saw again in future deep dives. But for now, thanks so much for sharing your expertise. Your insights have been incredible helpful.
My pleasure. It's always exciting to look at a company with this much potential.
And to you, dear listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Jindal Saw Ltd. We've uncovered so much about how they're doing financially, their plans for the future, even some potential risks. But remember, this is just the beginning.
I encourage you to dig a little deeper yourself. Check out their investor presentations, those industry reports, see what else you can find. The steel pipe world is a fascinating one. It really affects us all.
Absolutely. And be sure to let us know what you think. What surprised you about Jindal Saw? What did you learn that'll make everyone at your meeting go, wow? Until next time, keep diving deep. CRT.